Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have made it. 5 films down and 6 to go, and we are finally at the original trilogy. 3 of the most heralded, praised, acclaimed, inspirational films in cinema. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. We are here to talk about the original trilogy, and specifically in today's video, we're here to talk about Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Or as it used to be called, just Star Wars. Welcome back to Access Blockbusters, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Re-Examination series, where in this series of videos, I'm going to be discussing all of the 11 live-action Star Wars films that have been released thus far, from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, to Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And like I say with all these videos, really the goal for me here is just to watch these films in a new light in 2022, trying to block out all the noise from all of those different voices that are coming in from all different sides about Star Wars, and just watch the films as I see them today. I haven't seen a lot of these films in a long time. I know the lore very well, but I just haven't seen the films for themselves in a long time, because obviously there's been a lot of controversy around a lot of them. So it's been really refreshing thus far to see the first 5 films, just get my own thoughts straight about what I think about them. And you guys know that I'm not afraid to tell you guys what I think. Even if my opinion is unpopular, I don't care, because as long as I have my own reasons, and I'll give you my reasons for them, so I'm not just going to tell you that I think a movie is bad or I think a movie is good. I'm going to tell you why I think the way that I do, but even if you don't agree with me, that's totally fine, because we all are going to have different experiences with these films, and I want to make that very clear, especially going into a film like A New Hope, and I'll explain sort of the background and my expectations and my background with the film as we go along. So again, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, please make sure to do so, give this video a like, and comment down below with what you think of the original Star Wars film 1977's A New Hope. Let me know if you're enjoying the series thus far. This will mark the official halfway point of all the live action films, and then we will have a bunch of other videos, rankings, tier lists, all that sort of stuff after we are done. So let me know if you're enjoying these videos, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into Star Wars A New Hope. And like with all these films, I like to have sort of a 3-act structure to all my re-examinations and rewatches, to these videos at least, because I think that it's beneficial. And so basically we start out with my background, my history with this film, what my expectations were going into it. Then we talk about the story, we break it down basically, plot beat by plot beat, and then we go into the review and talk about the film, and then obviously we end it out with how my opinion has changed since I have last seen the film. So let's start out with some background information about what my expectations, what my past with this film has been. And just to let you guys know right away, to be completely truthful with you guys, I don't have the same nostalgia for the original trilogy as many people do. And I'll tell you why. As somebody who grew up watching the prequels, those were basically just Star Wars to me when I grew up. Star Wars was, whatever episodes 1, 2, and 3 were. They were Jar Jar Binks for all the good and bad. They were Anakin Skywalker. They were Obi-Wan Kenobi. And really, though, my childhood was the Clone Wars. Like, that was, if you had to ask me what Star Wars meant to me as a child, it meant the Clone Wars. That was really my childhood. So the prequel era, right, was really sort of my first, I don't know if indoctrination is the right word, but my first introduction maybe into Star Wars. And that really was the foundation, the groundwork for Star Wars for me. I later watched the original trilogy, of course. I did. And, that also became part of Star Wars. But again, I just want to let you know that really the foundation of what Star Wars was and looked like, particularly looked like, that's going to be important later on in this review, that was the prequel trilogy. But also, I want to make it clear also that the sequel trilogy played a big part in my upbringing with Star Wars as well, because I wasn't super young when I saw the sequel trilogy. I wasn't, really, really young, that I didn't really have a concept of what I liked and what I didn't like about movies. I did have a concept, an idea of what I really liked about certain films and what I didn't. So I went into the sequel trilogy with that sort of mindset, but also I was just young enough to be super excited. Like, the sequel trilogy to me was not this revitalization of Star Wars or anything like that. It was just Star Wars is back. Like, Star Wars is movies again. Star Wars isn't just on TV, it's in movies again. That's really what the sequel trilogy was for me. So again, the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy kind of hold these special places in my heart for nostalgic reasons. And that's why when I go back and watch those films, I can sort of look back at them and go, yeah, that's really, really bad, but it sort of had this special place in my heart. And I tell you this because the original trilogy really wasn't that for me. I actually don't have much nostalgia at all for the original trilogy, nor do I have many attached feelings going into the film, because, again, I saw the films, absolutely, and I saw them a few times, but they just kind of became a part of the Star Wars backstory and sort of became a part of just the general zeitgeist of Star Wars. But I didn't have that same nostalgia for people who grew up watching the original trilogy like I did with the prequels and just rewatching and rewatching and rewatching A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I had always known, obviously, that everyone said Empire was their favorite and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I knew that the original trilogy was held in such a high regard, but again, for me, it was just Star Wars. And so that's really, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this rewatch series, is just to examine how that opinion might have changed in this rewatch. And when I eventually rank all these films, if some of the original trilogy films aren't as high as some of the other ones, well, I mean, I would apologize, but I also wouldn't apologize, because this is what Star Wars is to me. And I want to make a greater point here. I promise I won't go on a soapbox for too long, but I just want to make a greater point here, not just about A New Hope or the prequels or the sequels, but just about Star Wars and film in general. This is what Star Wars is to me. This is my very unique experience with Star Wars. And though people who have grown up around the same time as me had similar experiences with Star Wars, I'm sure, this is my very, very subjectively unique experience with Star Wars that shapes the way that I look at the films. And nobody can take that away from me, and no one can give that to anyone else. You the viewer, have a very unique experience with Star Wars, and that's why you might see certain things differently than I do. That's why I might have a perception of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Again, we'll see what I think about it when I rewatch The Last Jedi, but that's why I might have that certain perception of Luke Skywalker that I say, well, it doesn't bother me as much that he's really different now, because I don't hold the original trilogy that closely to me. But I understand if somebody else does, and they see Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi and go, that's not my Luke Skywalker. So we can have this discourse, because at the end of the day, we each have our own conception of what Star Wars is to one another, and that's why we have all these differing views. Now, the problem obviously becomes when those differing views clash, and they clash in a way that really is rude and disrespectful and hateful and hurtful, and that's really what we want to avoid here. So I just want to bring that up just to say, if I don't heap glowing globs of praise on A New Hope like a lot of other people do, and I respect that absolutely, just know why. I'm going to watch this film. I did watch this film as sort of quote-unquote objectively as I could, just to see how it would hit me, and these are my thoughts. Okay, all that out of the way, let's get into the story. So New Hope opens, obviously, you have all these classic Star Wars things that we've taken for granted for so long, but it really is quite amazing to see a film that was made almost 50 years ago, just at a time when this kind of science fiction wasn't feasible on film, just establish all these things that we just take for granted, like the opening crawl, the space crawl, the yellow text, the Star Wars theme, the architecture interior of the ships, the Star Destroyers, and all of these things have maintained consistency 50 years later because of how distinctive and unique and special they were in 1977. So I just, right away, have to give huge props to George Lucas for that, because the imagination that went into this film is next to none. And another thing that's just remarkable is that George Lucas decides to start the film out with 2 droids. He doesn't even start the film out with humans. And just imagine, I imagine, sitting in the theater in 1977 and watching a film where, I mean, yeah, like you have these crazy sci-fi aspects, and all of a sudden you're following 2 droids on their adventures. You're not even following real human characters until, 15 or 20 minutes into the film. Now, one thing that becomes apparent right away, and one thing that stays consistent throughout most of the film, is the music. And I'll talk about what I mean by most, because it's not the consistency of quality, but it's more the consistency of just being there. But I'll talk about that in just a second. But first, I just have to, what hasn't been said before about John Williams? But really, when you watch a film like A New Hope, right? When you watch films really that are, I don't want to say older, because obviously different films are older to a lot of different people. So, when you watch films, though, that were made, let's say, pre-2000 or even pre-1990, 1980, you notice that there are a lot of sort of silent sequences in the film, because music wasn't really incorporated as much into those films as they are today. And I think that, I don't know, personally, this is a subjective thing, but it's to the detriment of the film, because I just think music adds so much incredible value to a film. And that's why I was so pleasantly surprised watching a film like Star Wars, because the music is everywhere. And John Williams just uses all of his themes so brilliantly. They are so wonderfully used. It is just fantastic composing, really just to a level that I haven't seen since. You talk about Hans Zimmer and you talk about Michael Giacchino, but it's John Williams. But what I meant by consistency and maybe mostly is just that there are some sequences in this film, though, that are oddly silent. Not oddly silent. I just think it was the filmmaking of the time where, there are just films where you're just sort of tracking things moving along, and you're just tracking a mouse droid, and you're just tracking a little cart that's pulling X-Wing pilots to their X-Wing fighters. And those sequences kind of felt a little bit empty, because you're kind of missing that music. But again, it's not the consistency of quality that I'm upset about. It's just rather, I wish that the music had been playing in those parts as well. It's just kind of makes the film feel a little bit hollow, if that makes sense. But that's, again, just a really personal, subjective thing. And what I think George Lucas does really well, just jumping back to the characters, is that he establishes the characterizations of all of the individual people in the film pretty quickly. Like, you know who Darth Vader is just by his first interaction with the Rebel fighters, and you know how Princess Leia is kind of, I don't know, snarky and arrogant and bites back at people, like, in a very endearing sort of way, especially to Han Solo later on in the film, but, you know, at the beginning even, to Darth Vader. And C-3PO is just sort of upset at R2-D2 all the time and that sort of stuff. I mean, these character traits are more, I noticed, exaggerated in this film, and I think that makes sense because this is the very first Star Wars film. You get more hints of nuance even in Empire, I'm sure, as I rewatch Empire and Return of the Jedi, but in this film, sort of the characters are basically the archetypes of what their characters will become later on, and I think that's fine. I think it just gives us a better idea of who they are. I also want to say that, again, a lot of the visual effects really stand up, and the way that they stand up is because they're practical. Not a lot of this film looks like it was purely computer generated. Like, pretty much, I would guarantee, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would guarantee over 90% of this film is practical. Maybe. That's just a wild guess. I don't know that for a fact, but I mean, it looks that way. The only shots that, to me, to a modern eye, quote unquote modern eye in 2022 or 2023 or whatever, you know, the only way that I can kind of tell this doesn't quite look like it's that fluid, and it's just because I've seen so many shots of ships flying and things like that, is really when the ships are flying over surfaces. And what I mean by that is later on in the film when X-Wings are flying over Yavin 4, they're kind of floating over the trees, and the trees just don't move, and you can kind of tell that that's just a background, and a model is just kind of flying over it. So, I mean, those are just minor nitpicks, but when the ships are kind of flying, it does look a little bit static for me. But again, it's 1977, so what am I saying? It's, you know, it was 50 years ago almost. And then from there, we pick up on Tatooine. R2-D2 and C-3PO kind of get lost. Now, I will say, and look, I'm not going to give anything a free pass just because it's Star Wars. Like, I'm going to point out criticisms that I have, and this is one of them. There are some really interesting plot conveniences, especially when you look at Star Wars as a whole now. No, I'm not talking about the sequel trilogy at all. And I'm not even talking about the prequel trilogy. Like, I understand that there are tons and tons and tons of inconsistencies, even between the prequel and the original trilogy, that, I don't know, it kind of feels weird, right? Like, having watched the prequel trilogy just, you know, right before this and now watching the original trilogy. I mean, one of the things that jumped out to me right away is R2-D2 and Obi-Wan Kenobi. There are just so many episodes of Clone Wars, copious amounts where Obi-Wan is talking to R2-D2 and Anakin Skywalker, and yet he's like, oh, I don't recognize this droid. I mean, again, these are just things you've got to get over, right? Because, you know, continuity, but there are even things within the original trilogy that I want to point out here. So I'm not going to nitpick too much between prequel and original trilogy. I don't think that's fair. I mean, I do think it's fair, but I just don't want to linger on it too much. But I mean, inconsistencies from where we go from here to the next films. And I understand that you don't have the entire plan mapped out, but just some of the things feel really awkward to me. Like, for example, Luke and Leia. I mean, it's very clear throughout the entire film that Luke has a crush on Leia, and Leia likewise. And then the next film, they're siblings or something. Or, I mean, in 2 films, they're siblings, I guess. So, you know, things like that. And also just little things like, I mean, I guess Darth Vader can sense Obi-Wan on the Death Star because he recognizes him from the last time he saw him, which is now actually in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. But, I mean, he's standing right in front of his daughter, and he's flying right behind his son, and he doesn't recognize something. I mean, he recognizes that Luke is Force sensitive, so maybe there's some canonical thing where you have to have been in their presence before to recognize them. I don't know. I mean, was Vader ever close to Leia in Obi-Wan Kenobi? I don't quite remember. Anyways, that's a side tangent. So just little things here and there that kind of make you go, yeah, I mean, not everything was planned out to a T, and that's fine. I mean, it's you know, it's a trilogy, so this is the first film. So yeah, you meet Luke Skywalker, and I mean, I'm not going to lie, out of all the actors in this film who, again, it's 1977, the acting was a little bit more exaggerated, a little bit more cheesy, a little bit more over the top than I'm not going to even lie. In certain places, it's a lot more cheesy and a lot more over the top. But that's fine. I mean, it's, you know, it's just what you have to expect from a film that was made almost 50 years ago. But out of all the actors delivering the dialogue that was given to them, I think that Mark Hamill's performance was honestly the weakest. I think that it was pretty clear that Mark Hamill was, I mean, he was going for something. He was going for that really, really energetic vibe, and just kind of, I don't know. I mean, you could convince me that it was a choice, but you could also very easily convince me that Mark Hamill is probably giving the worst performance out of all of them. I don't know what that is, but at least for me, his performance translated the least out of all the characters in the film. Just wanted to point that out there at the beginning because, I mean, I think the rest of them, Harrison Ford does a great job. Carrie Fisher does a great job. Obviously, Alec Guinness, so But the character of Luke Skywalker is great. I mean, it's this boy kind of longing for adventure, and he meets Ben Kenobi. R2D2 has to deliver the Death Star plans, and has to talk to him about Leia and all that kind of stuff. And this is where, actually, funnily enough, because I don't think that the stuff that George Lucas does in between his own projects, like in between the prequels and the sequels, don't line up quite as well. Like, R2D2 knows everything about Anakin Skywalker. Why doesn't he ever tell Luke? But interestingly enough, it's actually the stuff that had been set up in the Disney Plus, the Disney era series, that actually lines up pretty well. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of skeptical when I originally watched the Obi-Wan Kenobi series of like, this doesn't seem like it lines up that well. But when you watch A New Hope, actually most everything lines up pretty well. Like you have these moments of when Leia is in the hologram, right? And she's saying, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. And I mean, it's interesting because before she says that, the previous message is just talking about, well, you served my father in the Clone Wars, and now he's the one asking for your help. And we saw that scene in Rogue One, where Bail Organa says, "I trust her with my life." So we see that first glimpse of that, and then she's delivering that message, and she's saying, "Look, you served my father in the Clone Wars. Will you help him out?" And that's like a formal message that Bail is delivering to Obi-Wan through Leia. But then I feel like when she says, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope," that almost feels like that personal little touch of, I know you. We used to know each other, And I think I don't know. I think that's really cool, actually. So then, obviously, Luke's uncle and aunt tragically die, and Luke decides, I'm going to go with you, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we're going to go to space, and they meet Han Solo and Chewbacca at Mos Eisley, one of the most iconic scenes in Star Wars, obviously. If for no other reason than the Cantina music, I mean, that stuff's iconic, right? And we're continually cutting back and forth between that and Darth Vader and what he's doing. And it's really interesting to see, right? Because Darth Vader obviously was one of the most powerful Jedi and Sith in the galaxy, but he's kind of taking orders from Tarkin here in A New Hope. So again, just kind of these things of, it's not quite established who he is. He's sort of just the lackey in this movie, but he becomes a very intimidating presence in the next movie. So yeah, he's very intimidating in this movie as well, I should say. James Earl Jones does a great job, obviously. And yeah, I mean, when Luke and Obi-Wan meet Chewie and Han, I mean, I have to say Harrison Ford's performance, it's great. Yeah, special editions, Jabba looks awful, looks absolutely awful in this movie, but we can kind of get past that. I mean, it's George Lucas tinkering with his films, and I don't know. And this is where the movie really picks up. It's, actually, I was surprised how much of the movie takes place on the Death Star, because I realized that by the time they get off the Death Star, the movie was almost over. It was like 3/4 over, and the final trench run was really just the last little bit of the movie, which is cool. But yeah, the Death Star sequence, that was really the big part of the movie, and it was fun. I mean, you get to see Luke and Han do their classic Stormtrooper stuff and mess with the Stormtroopers and fight their way into the trash compactor and get their way out, and C-3PO gets into his antics. But I love how that's all juxtaposed by Obi-Wan kind of being serious and moving around, Darth Vader being serious and moving around, and finally realizing that they're confronting one another. And yeah, that fight, I mean, obviously doesn't look as great as it could. I mean, you've seen those YouTube videos where they reimagine that stuff, and it looks so much better. But again, 1977, what can you really say, right? And this really does line up pretty okay with Obi-Wan, the series. Like, I was really surprised because it's on a couple levels, right? I mean, obviously, you have the whole, when I last left you, I was but the learner, but now I am the master. Like, he called him his master in the Obi-Wan finale, I believe. And, Obi-Wan Kenobi calls him Darth. And I think earlier in the scene, Darth Vader says to Tarkin, like, he's on the ship. I can feel his presence. And it's that very similar dynamic that he has with the Grand Inquisitor in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, where all of a sudden he feels Obi-Wan. He's like, I gotta go after him. And one of the other subtler details that I think is really cool is the realization that Obi-Wan Kenobi says this, like, strike me down and I will become more powerful. Because whenever I had seen the film before, I always kind of thought, like, this is just random. This is just kind of a random thing that's inserted in the film just to give Luke time to escape. But now that the Star Wars canon has been really established, what I realized is that at the end of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, he goes off to train with Liam Neeson's Qui-Gon. So the last time they had met, they had fought, right? And Obi-Wan Kenobi was fighting for his life. But this time, Obi-Wan Kenobi has learned the secret of being a Force ghost from Qui-Gon Jinn and understands now, this is it. This is my last confrontation. Luke is the new hope, and we move forward here. And I thought that was really, really cool. And like I said, the film basically ends there with the trench run. Like, the film, they leave the Death Star, and then it's the trench run. And I think the trench run is awesome. Like, the visual effects, seeing the enormity of the Death Star that really was accentuated in Rogue One. I loved it in Rogue One, but seeing it here as well is really cool. The visual effects are great, getting to see Biggs, getting to see Wedge, obviously Porkins. And you get this hint of Obi-Wan Kenobi returning in the form of a Force ghost, but you just hear this voice, and I think that's really cool. And then the film ends with the medal ceremony. And it's a really nice I don't know. I don't know if warm is the right word for this film, but you just feel good after watching this movie. It's Star Wars, and you really do get into it. Like the first 15 minutes or so, I was still kind of bothered by the fact that these are 1977 audio and visual effects and things like that, and it just wasn't quite lining up to my current, like the way that my brain is adjusted to modern cinema. But once you kind of get into the movie, it really disappears, and you're just watching a really fun movie that really moves. And a lot of movies that were made, I don't know, 1977 and onward till 2000-ish, they're slow, a lot of those movies. And so just to see a really fast-paced, breezy, bright movie like this, it's awesome. It really is. And that was A New Hope. And guys, I mean, how has my opinion changed from the last time I seen this movie? Well, I mean, I had always known that New Hope was a good movie, and I always just kind of assumed, yeah, like I'm gonna like it when I watch it. So I think that that's the mindset that I always went into this film going like, yeah, I'll probably like it, and I did every time, but I never got a ton out of it. I mean, this time around, I noticed a lot of the little flaws and things I didn't like about the movie, because, you know, I mean, we've grown up now, and we're kind of looking at these films. I'm looking at these films more in a quote-unquote more objective lens, but I also was able to really just enjoy a lot of the things that I really didn't pick up before, and I think that was fun. So I think that A New Hope is a very, very enjoyable Star Wars film. It's a very enjoyable film, and I think that it really deserves its place as one of the pioneers of science fiction and Star Wars as well. So that was A New Hope. Those were my thoughts on A New Hope. Again, I know a lot of people adore this film, think it's one of the best films ever made. I completely understand. I think that this is a great film. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. So let me know what you guys think of A New Hope in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. Give this video a like. And guys, next time is obviously the film that most everybody, not everyone, considers to be the best Star Wars film, The Empire Strikes Back. I cannot wait to rewatch it and talk about it with you guys as well. So for now, thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.